Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
I can.
Great. Good morning. I was making sure it was still morning. Hi, Simma.
Hi. It's definitely morning where I am.
I know you. What time is it? 7?
7, yeah.
Yeah, I used to work with some people in the Pacific. I think you're Pacific, right?
Pacific, right.
Yeah. We'll just wait a minute, make sure everybody gets in, and then I'm going to do a quick introduction of you.
Sounds good to me.
Wonderful.
I like your book. I like the saying in your background, collect moments, not things.
Yeah, I'm in my office today for once. I came into the office and shut my door. Usually I'm working from home, but I need to actually change that quote. But I do like that quote.
What are you going to change it to?
I don't know. I have like a book of quotes. I'm a quote person. I don't know. I have to think about it. I can only fit so many words on that chart, so.
Well, thank you for all your help.
No problem. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. All right, I'm going to introduce Miss Simma, and it's just going to be a brief introduction because we will hear from her again later, and I'll be doing a longer bio. But Simma Lieberman is a consultant and speaker, advisor, and author, and she hosts a weekly cross-race podcast on race, everyday conversations on race for everyday people. She's going to speak about advocacy and allyship for equity in the workplace. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Simma.
Thank you. Hi. Hi. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. It's I'm in the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast, so I'm 3 hours earlier. So welcome to my program on allyship. Today, what we're going to talk about the definition. Oh, I have to share my screen now, right? Okay.
Yep, and I'll let you know when we can see it.
Oh, that's right. All right, just putting it up on my screen doesn't mean that you can see it. I thought,
That's
oh,
right.
I'm glad you told me that. Okay, share screen.
And then make sure we're recording as well.
There.
Anna.
Okay, can you see?
Yeah, yep, we can see it.
Okay. So welcome to allyship, or I like to call it beyond allyship. Today we're going to talk about the definition of an ally, what it means to be one. What are the practices of allyship, the benefits, challenges, and risks of allyship, because there are benefits, but there's also some challenges and risks, and how allies can make a difference, when to speak up, when to step back, and how to be an ally for BLM and BIPOC, and beyond allyship to full participation and belonging. And if at any time you have a question, please, because I want this to be interactive, please either just, do you have the raise hand function, or put it in the chat and someone will tell me, hey, there's a question in the chat, or if you have something that you want to say. I'm glad, because this is a breakout. So in breakouts, we want to have people talking to each other or talking to me. You know, we've been in the COVID crisis now for over a year, and people are dealing with stress, anxiety, and a lot of displaced anger. We're seeing that a lot of people can't handle the ambiguity of this pandemic, and so they seek to blame people from different groups for the current situation. As a result, we're seeing a qualitative escalation of racist, verbal, and physical attacks against Black, Latinx, Asian, and Jewish people. You know, one time, well, before February 2020, it was easier to think that what happened to the outside world wasn't relevant to what happened in the business world. But that's no longer true, because lines between work, home, and community are blurred, because our homes have been our workplaces, and our workplaces are in our homes. And even when we go back to work, a lot of the things that happened in our homes we're bringing to work, and vice versa. So people being attacked, it's not just happening on the outside world, but people are your employees, they're your coworkers, they're your customers, your clients, or your neighbors. One of them might even be you or one of your friends. People have been traumatized and are afraid to step out of their homes for fear of being a victim of the people seeking to blame them, or blame those people who don't look like them. And as a result, allyship is more important than ever. And I mean, at some point in our lives, we all will need an ally for an idea or for something that we want to do. But today we really want to talk about allyship in terms of being marginalized, and specifically in terms of race. So what's the definition of an ally? An ally is someone who's willing to take action. And that's the key word, is action, in support of another person in order to remove external barriers that impede that person from fully contributing their skills and talents and achieving success in the workplace or community. So what are some of the external barriers that we talk about? We talk about the external barriers that impede people are having to deal with overt biases around race, age, religion, sexual orientation, any of the dimensions of diversity, gender, ethnicity, ability, disability. All of these are external barriers in that when people have biases against people, it limits their ability to get ahead, it limits their ability to get promotions, it limits their ability to get recognized. Especially things like unconscious and unintentional micro inequities and behaviors that result in bias based on those characteristics. So what does an ally do in practice? One, because being an ally is more than just wanting to be an ally or saying that you support Black Lives Matter. You know, after George Floyd, I got so many calls from people saying, I want to be an ally. I want to support Black Lives Matter. I'm going to put something on my social media. I'm putting a sign. I mean, all of those are cool. It's important because we want to have an environment that shows support, to show support against racism. But ultimately, it's the actions that you take. And oftentimes people don't really know what those actions are. They want to be an ally, but they don't exactly always know what to say or when to say it. So here are some times when you could be an ally. One would be speaking out against comments or jokes that are racist, homophobic, sexist, etc. And so often we hear people, so often you're in the workplace and you want to be one of the guys or one of the girls or one of the women, or you want to be one of the group. And so you hear comments that are racist, homophobic, sexist, etc. And what do? Well, a lot of people who, if I talk to them one-on-one, they'd say, I'm really against those jokes. I'm really against those comments. But they still end up laughing at those jokes because they want to be accepted. But once you become an ally, once you say, I'm an ally, you're making a commitment. You're making a commitment to speak out against those comments. You're making a commitment to speak out against those jokes. And you're making a commitment to intervene when you're hearing those jokes. It's not enough to just walk away. But in your workplace, in your group, you're going to have to say something. And we're going to talk about what to say and how to say. The other thing is speaking out and then speaking up in support of someone for a marginalized group. I know I'm sure for many of us, because we're in the world, we've been in situations where someone will make a comment about somebody from a marginalized group, like say, make a racist comment about a Black person that works in the organization. And because people want to be part of the group, they don't know what to say, they say nothing. So when you're an ally, you start speaking up. You start speaking up in support of someone from any of the marginalized group. If somebody makes a comment about somebody's race, that's somebody's ethnicity, even if it's just you and the other person, if you're an ally, you're going to say something. Even if you don't know what to say exactly, you're going to say something. I just got to know, it says time is up for the 10 minutes breakout room. Do you want to close all the breakout rooms now?
So
I
I clicked keep it open because I
Yeah.
don't know if the time was set right. So I think we're okay.
I'm keeping it open. All
We're
right.
keeping it open.
Yeah, we're keeping it open. So being an ally means that you're willing to speak up in support of someone from a marginalized group, even if it's just you and one of your buddies. Sometimes being an ally means reporting a fellow employee to a manager at a higher level because somebody consistently they're harassing somebody, or they're making racist, homophobic comments or sexist jokes, and they will not stop. And so when that happens, they are creating a toxic work environment. And you have to ask yourself, do you want to work in a toxic work environment? No. And if you say that you're an ally, sometimes you have to report a fellow employee to a manager at a higher level if that behavior doesn't stop. Being an ally in practice means intervening. If you see somebody bullied because of their race, ethnicity, etc., it's important for you to step in front and to intervene. I was recently in a situation. I was at a Home Depot, and I was walking in to buy something for my house, and I saw there was this young Black kid on the ground, and there's 5 white men surrounding this young Black kid. And there's someone in authority, whether he was a police officer or security, I'm not sure, but he had the guy's hand behind his back and he's twisting his arm, and the guy is screaming in pain. So my friends afterwards said, you really could get hurt, but I wasn't even thinking. Without even thinking, I jumped in front of, I jumped in the security guard's face, and I tried to get between him and the kid on the ground. And I just started yelling, stop it, you're hurting him, stop it. Because I felt that there was all this energy, and I needed to stop that energy. I need to get in between the energy of this guy hurting this kid and his anger, and this kid crying out in pain. So at which point, the security guard turns his anger on me and starts saying, get out of my face. Don't you dare interfere with me. I said, but you are hurting this kid. There's 5 of you, and you're hurting this kid. So I don't know what happened. Somehow he let the kid up and he let the kid go. And what I heard afterwards was that the kid was accused of shoplifting. I said, well, did he have anything on him? And they said, no, he didn't have anything on him, but he probably just got rid of whatever it was. I don't know what happened, but I do know that whatever was going on, the way that this kid was being treated was definitely inappropriate. And that was overkill to have. I mean, his arm could have been broken. So afterwards, I wasn't even thinking, but afterwards people started clapping for me saying, yeah. And people said, I wish I had done that. I wish I had thought about doing that. And the reason that I had done it is because I do think about that. I do think, it's something that I do think about. And what I'm going to ask everybody is to start thinking about what it means to be an ally in practice. What are you willing to do? And to think about situations where we're going to talk about this, where you might have been an ally, but you didn't because you didn't know what to do. Or when you needed an ally, what you wish somebody would have done, because so often people don't know what to do. Either they don't know what to do, they don't know what to say, they freeze, or they think that it's none of their business. So there's a lot of good people who do nothing. And when good people do nothing, that's when problems occur. We saw that in Nazi Germany. We see that in so many other situations. So I'm asking you to be good people who do something. Now, I talked about some of the positive behavior of being an ally, but I want to talk about some of the harmful non-ally behavior. And one is to be the helper or the savior. And if you're the helper or the savior, that's when you say, oh, people can't take care of themselves. Like, I'm white and a Black person can't take care of themselves, so I have to do everything for them. That's not being an ally, because being an ally is you intervene when you have to intervene, but it's also helping to empower people. So helper savior just helps you, doesn't really help the person that needs an ally. And then we have people who are the bystanders. This is what a bystander will just stand there where something's going on. They do nothing. And afterwards, what they might do is they might go up to the person, like if say you're in the work environment and somebody, you have an African-American woman in a meeting and she has an idea. She says her idea. Everybody ignores her, but then a white guy says the same idea and everybody's saying, "Oh, Chad, that's great. Oh, we love that idea." But meanwhile, Anna had the same idea first. So people who are bystanders, this is the work environment, people who are bystanders will just say nothing, but afterwards they'll say to Anna, "Oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you." Well, that doesn't help Anna. So if you want to go beyond being a bystander, it's important to think about, well, what would I do next time? And one of the things that you would want to do next time would be say, "Hey, Chad, Anna just had the same idea." Or if people ignore Anna, you would say something like, Anna just said something. So you would intervene. You would say something in support, but I mean, you wouldn't say, "Now what Anna is trying to say," because that would be the helper or the savior. What Anna is trying to say, let me rephrase it for everybody. No, you would want to be able to not be a bystander. You want to be a supporter and say, "Hey, people, listen up." And then the third harmful non-ally behavior is the colluder. And the colluder is you hear somebody make a racist joke, and what you do is you stand there and laugh. And then afterwards, somebody says, "Well, why did you laugh? Did you think it was funny?" "No, I didn't think it was funny, but I didn't want to alienate the person making the racist joke, so I just laughed." That is collusion. You're not being an ally. If you laugh, you're saying that it's okay. If you say nothing, you're saying it's okay. So if you're an ally, you have to step up and you say, "You know what? This is not okay at all." I would like to ask you, and I'd like to have people think about this first. And then I'm going to ask you to put it in the chat, or do we have a hand raise function? We do, or put in the hand raise function so you could be called on. Think about a time when you had an ally, what they did right. And then I'm going to ask you to think of a time when you needed an ally, what you would have wanted someone to do. I mean, maybe you never had a time when you had an ally, and you could only think about a time when you needed an ally. But think about both questions, and you might only be able to answer one, but I'd love to hear from you. So either a time when you had an ally, what they did right, or a time when you needed an ally, what you would have wanted someone to do. And I can't see the chat box if we have anybody in the chat box.
I'll let you know. I'll yell out if somebody puts
Okay.
it in.
Or somebody raising their hand.
Stanley wrote, "I had an ally one time when I was financially experiencing hardship at an employer and a woman of white ethnicity advocating and continued to persist that I get a raise."
Hey, so Stanley, did you get your raise?
I did. They actually gave me an hourly raise of $2 an hour based on this woman's advocacy and as well as her reasons that I was worth the raise to the company. So yeah, I definitely did due to that ally.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, because oftentimes people don't think, people think, and I'm going to talk about this later when I talk about small things that have big impact. Oftentimes people think, oh, well, what can I do? If I just say something, it's not going to make a difference. But it made this is a big difference. I mean, I'm sure that $2 an hour, I know that $2 an hour for me, when I was working like that would have made a huge difference to me. And that person, so thank you so much for sharing that. And Tess, I see Tess has a hand raised.
And we have a comment from Donna. She shares, my thesis defense, one professor hammering at one question and ignoring my citation-rich answers. Another prof finally speaking up to say, you know, she's right, Paul.
So what happened? After somebody said, you know, she's right, what was Paul's reaction?
Well, he stopped questioning me. He was in the front row and he simply sat back with his arms crossed. But I passed my defense and got my degree.
Well, it just shows that you never know what impact, you never know who's going to be your ally. Sometimes allies come from really surprising places. And you never know what impact you're going to have on another person. You never know what impact you're going to have on another person's life. Tess, I see your hand raised.
Yes, I've got actually examples on both sides of that question, on both of those questions. A time when I had an ally was in a business meeting when I worked for a Fortune 500 company. And I was sitting in a business meeting with a lot of the executive VPs, and I would bring up something, a topic that, or not a topic, but a point that was directly addressing their question. And I kept getting talked over. And my own boss at that point, who was another woman, actually stepped in and said, can we just listen to Tess? I think she has something to say about this. And that was wonderful. The flip side is a time when I needed an ally. It goes directly to what Stanley was talking about. I was asking my superiors for a raise that would put me on an equal footing with everyone else in my pay range. And they, all men, were telling me that I didn't deserve it because I was not the major breadwinner in the house. And
wait, when was this? 1950? When was this?
Late 90s. And then they asked me if I was going to get pregnant again. So, it was not pleasant. I would have loved to have had someone else in that room who would have stood up and said, as an HR professional, I kept trying to soft pedal the idea that, guys, you can't ask me those questions. You can't deny me this raise on that basis. But that's the way it went. It would have been nice to have another strong voice in there.
Yeah. What ended up happening?
I got the raise.
Good. I'm glad. Anybody else? Okay. So my next question is, the first question is, describe a time when you were an ally. I'll give you a couple of minutes because sometimes it takes a couple of minutes to think about that. Describe a time when you were an ally.
Some of why people are thinking I have an answer for that. So the previous company I worked at, we had employee resource groups or business resource groups, whatever you call them, affinity groups. But, I wanted to get involved. There was a women's networking group, obviously. I'm like, oh, I need to be in that group. But then I said, I really reflected on that and thought about other groups that I should get involved in to be more curious and understand other cultures. So I was involved in the Pride Committee and actually volunteered at some main events for that, also AsianNet, and volunteered for events for that. And I think, I don't know, I've met so many wonderful people just being an ally and being involved in those employee resource groups that are lifelong friends and just having a better understanding. And yeah, so I think that's when I've probably stepped up to be an ally. It's one example, there's others, but that's probably a big one that I reflect on a lot.
Thank you so much. Anybody else can describe a time when you were an ally?
Yeah, hi. So this is Misty Bond. I am really trying to be an ally every day. That's one of my goals, obviously, is to continue to be aware of my surroundings and those who speak out against, people of less equity groups. And I have a niece who struggles to understand different cultures and diversity and doesn't appreciate it. So I regularly have conversations with her to be an ally, to point out when she's being, unjust with her thoughts or her comments. So that's something that I try to do on a regular basis since she's a teenager, to help guide her and hopefully continue to help people see where things are not just and where they are inequitable.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really important, the fact that you do that. And I have to say that for many people, it's hard for them because they're afraid if it's somebody in their family, they're afraid if they say something, they're going to alienate that person. They're afraid of being ostracized. But if we really believe in equity, if you really believe that all lives matter, I believe all lives matter. So if you believe all lives matter, then you have to look at whose life has not mattered, because you can't say all lives matter and not look at whose life doesn't matter. And so that's right now where we have to give a lot of our attention, because it's like what Dr. Benton was talking about, the humanity and the connection and all of us together. So if you say all lives matter and you're only talking about other white people, then you're saying only white lives matter. But if you believe that all lives matter, you have to look at whose lives don't matter and what can I do to help make sure that all lives matter. What power do I have? And like I said, you have the power to speak up, and you do have the power, and you did speak up. So I think it's great. And I think sometimes it's for a lot of people, a lot of white people, it's hard for them to speak up in front of their families. But you know what? If you don't do it, then it's just going to continue. And if you don't do it
has to start there.
That's right. Yeah. And you have the power. If your family listens to you, you have, or if your family won't listen to you, someone's going to listen to you. But I know I was telling somebody, I said, I'm not going to sit at my dinner table and listen to somebody spout off a bunch of racist, sexist, homophobic comments without saying something. That's just not going to happen. And I may not kick them out of my house, but hopefully they're going to listen. And oftentimes said right, because ultimately we want to help people change. Ultimately, we want to change situations, right? So you have to think about, would I rather be right or would I rather get results? Well, I rather get results and help make people change. And for me, that's where a lot of my allyship comes in. I mean, I will put myself in front of other people to save people just because I don't think about, I'm from the Bronx. I grew up in the Bronx, so I grew up that's just kind of what you did. So I cannot look at myself in the mirror if I don't make it a point to help create change. And that's what being an ally is. You're really helping to create change. Tess, you have your hand raised. But you're on mute. You're muted.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to unraise that. Do you click it again? Because I'm done.
Oh, okay. Well, oftentimes there will be a thing that says lower hand.
Oh, there it is. Found it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll share from the chat from Stanley, a time when I was an ally, I was working with individuals who had histories of criminal backgrounds based on an employer wanted to discredit an individual, an opportunity to work for their company, and I stepped in and stated that we expect individuals to re-enter and become productive and contributing members of society, but never wanting to give them the opportunity to do so. The employee hired the woman and gave her a starting rate higher than the rest of those in her department.
How'd the employee do?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said, how did the employee do?
You know what? She went on to become a supervisor over the department that she was a part of, and ended up surpassing the very individual that wasn't trying to give her the job to begin with. So and he ended up getting fired later down the line. But yeah, she went on to do extremely well. I believe that was about 5 years ago. I think she's still at the company to this day.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because that is really important too. That's another example. You know, oftentimes people say, I want to be an ally, I want to help people. And then if we look at the justice system, and we look at the injustice in the justice system, and oftentimes like who unfairly gets in the justice system, a lot of times like it's Black or brown people disproportionately, right? And then we say we want to give everybody a chance, but since we have a disproportionate amount of Black and brown people who've been in the justice system, if you then use people's incarceration as a way of eliminating them, you are leaving out huge groups of people, and you're leaving out potential genius. You're leaving out people who could make a huge difference. So thank you for that, Stanley. I'm glad you did that.
Me too.
Yeah, you know, because I know, I mean, you know, I have a podcast. I have a podcast, Everyday Conversations on Race for Everyday People. It's a cross-race conversation on race. I'm going to talk about it later. And I've had several of my friends who were former felons who were incarcerated on the show, who were African-American. And, you know, they talk about their experiences, and they talk about the fact that when they got out, someone helped them get the jobs they have. And, you know, I had like 4 or 5 of my friends, and, you know, now they're professional people, they're doing really well, and they're making a difference. But if nobody had stepped up, I don't know where they would be. You know, they wouldn't. So anytime you say something, you have an opportunity to help somebody's life. Okay, now the next question is, describe a time when you didn't take action. What would you do differently today?
So I'll share really quickly. I got an alert saying that the breakout room might close. So I don't know if we're at our time or not.
No, we're
I
not
don't
at our
think so.
time. It's just closing that. I guess they're not bringing new people. They're not letting new people in.
Oh, okay, great.
They said
Hey,
that
if-
they would usher us back in at the end of this. They said that if it ended early, that they would put us right back in. And she
Okay,
would-
so that might be what.
Yeah. So it's like, hey, if they came back late from break, well, then
I feel like we were supposed to have a little bit more time in our breakout sessions. Is there any
Yeah,
way
I think
to get
that's
back to our breakout sessions?
We were supposed to have more time. I don't know what happened.
yeah, I didn't even get to talk about ally behaviors. Like what's
Yeah,
up?
we still have a good 20 minutes. So is there a way for us
Let
to
me
get
find
back to our
Morley.
I think Forley's aware, and I think she said she was going to be putting us back in. She's probably
Okay,
working on
perfect.
it.
Okay, perfect.
Well,
Yeah,
hey,
I know,
everybody. Good to see everybody again.
Yeah, I caught an option when it was counting down the first time. The second time it didn't give us an option, but it was sitting on 0. I thought it would stay there.
What happened?
So the breakout room ended early, but I have the option to open the rooms back up. How
Would you
more
do
time
that?
Yes, how much more time do we have?
Until 11 o'clock.
That's what I thought. Someone just opened.
We'll just give it a minute for everybody to come back. Simma should be back any moment.
Hi, are we back in the same breakout room?
We made
We're
it.
back.
Hey, so, okay, so the next
You may
question
need to
is,
share your
Anna.
screen again.
But
oh,
Anna had something that she was getting ready to say before we got broken back into the main session.
thank you. And now I got to share the screen again, right? Okay. I think, am I sharing? Not yet.
Not yet. There we go.
Okay. Hey, we're back. Okay.
Yeah, so I was going to share an experience that I am not proud of in hindsight, but I was in high school and we had a teacher make a really, especially now as an adult, I realize really offensive joke about LGBT people. And there was a discussion amongst my friends that we should write a letter to the principal complaining that that happened because it was really inappropriate. And being a high school student, I was really nervous about rocking the boat in any way and was very uncomfortable with that idea and didn't participate in that, which, like I said, now I realize was probably not a good choice. But I think kind of like we were talking about before, I was really afraid of disrupting things. And so I didn't take a stand, even though it made me really uncomfortable that was happening. So it was not easy for me at that time to overcome that.
And how about now?
Getting a breakout room will close in so many seconds again.
Yeah, I did see that.
I thought they only gave us 1 minute because they just wanted to make sure Anna could say what she was going to say.
Oh gosh.
what it was.
Yeah. Here, Anna, get vulnerable and then we're done.
Well, you know what? I'm going to share something. I'm going to share a couple things. One is, for me, I am in the LGBTQ IA community. And a long time ago, I was doing a workshop on diversity and inclusion. And at the time when I first got into this field, because I thought, hey, I could just be myself.
For those of you who can hear me, I apologize. I'm not quite sure what happened, but not everybody could rejoin their room. So I'm going to open back up their rooms again so they can rejoin their facilitators. So please be patient.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Hi. I think we're back for real this time.
Okay. So I was doing a workshop and it was for law enforcement. It was a diversity workshop. And I was an LGBTQ person, but I wasn't out because at that time, there was still a lot of homophobia even in the diversity field. And they had somebody come in and talk about LGBTQ, and somebody made a homophobic comment. And I'm the facilitator. And I was so afraid that somebody would peep me, that somebody would know that I was a lesbian, that I didn't say anything. And thinking about it now, it's one of those things that if I could do over again, I would speak up. But at the time, because I was afraid, I didn't say anything. So I think that when we look at what we didn't say, it's helpful because then we can look at what we would do differently. And the other thing is, I have my family is interracial, and when my partner died several years ago, and when we came into the school and we said that she had died, one of the teachers made a homophobic remark, and we were devastated. We didn't even know what to do. And I've been doing this work and think, oh, I should speak up for myself. But I was so devastated by what happened that I couldn't. And two teachers stepped in and not only spoke up, they said, we're going to have a ritual in our children's classes because she was so active in the school. And that helped me. I mean, that was such a great help to me. So sometimes it's just, again, the little things. Anybody else want to share an experience when you wish you had, when something happened and you didn't take action, and what you would do differently today?
I'm sorry, I don't have the hand raising gesture in my reactions. I can.
You're cool, don't worry.
Okay, perfect. I was gonna say I can, blow the celebratory trumpet. I can do all of that, but I can't raise a hand. So I had one that actually emerged yesterday. That as I was, so it was an action that was committed against me at a local county jail. And it was funny. One of my coworkers had brought this up to our supervisor and said, "Hey, I'm not one that's quick to pull, hey, I think this happened because I'm Black card." I say that with loose terms, but I'm not one that jumps the gun on those things, just because I know we're all in this journey trying to learn together. My coworker, though, however, after 3 instances, brought this up to our supervisor. And, I was sharing the scenario with some other coworkers, and they were like, "I'm sorry that happened." And my natural response was, "It's okay." And they were like, no, it's not okay. It's not okay that this happened to you. And so that was an instance where my coworkers motivated me to be able to respond in a better format, to know no, it's not okay that this happened. And this is not the norm, and it shouldn't happen that way.
Thank you. I think that's really important. And were you the only Black person?
I am currently. I think we are in the process of diversifying a little bit more. So I'm optimistic and hopeful about that at the end of 2021.
Because I want to talk about because I know they're probably going to kick us out soon, about some ally actions and different situations. And one of them is that if you hear an employee, colleague, or friend make offensive jokes or comments about somebody based on demographics, stop them immediately and tell them that you don't want to hear it, and tell them why. But also, don't assume that because someone from a targeted group doesn't speak up or make a complaint that they think it's okay. And oftentimes, if you're in a situation like, say, and I'll say, something that's common, you have an mostly all white group, and somebody is Black in the group, they're not going to say anything. Because for one thing, they want to keep their job. They want to feel safe. They don't want to be ostracized, because they don't know if anybody else is going to speak up. And so oftentimes people will say, it's okay, even though inside it's not okay. So that's why it's so important for you as an ally to speak up and say, no, it's not okay. Because don't rely, if it's only one person from a particular group, don't rely on them to say something, because they have to take care of themselves also. I mean, I remember when I would hear homophobic jokes, and there were times when I didn't say anything because I was afraid. And I was always so grateful when somebody else said something. And when they do that, when you do that, when you speak up, other people will also speak up. People who are afraid to speak up, they might speak up. And then you're also empowering them, and you're empowering the person who was targeted, because it's really not okay. So that's really important, because so often I hear people say, oh, well, Joe didn't say anything, so why should I say something? But it's important that you do. Another thing is to be able to understand why you didn't speak up, or what you were afraid of, and then you could do something about it. They've done research about bystanders, and they said to people, well, why didn't you speak up? Why didn't you say something, even though you're like a good person? And so often people will say, one, I didn't feel like I had, they didn't use the word, but social credibility. They said, well, since I'm not Black, or I'm not brown, or I'm not gay, I didn't feel that I had a right to do that. But guess what? You do have a right to do it, and you are needed in terms of being an ally. So you do have credibility. Or I was afraid of saying the wrong thing. You know what? As long as you say something, it's going. Shonda, say what you were going to say. What were you going to say that comes to psychological safety in the workplace? That's right. It does have to do with psychological safety in the workplace. And oftentimes the people who are allies, they're worried about psychological safety, but this is not the time for you to worry about psychological safety. This is a time for one to know that you do have a right to speak up, because if it impacts you, you have a right to speak up. The other thing that people say is that, well, I froze. I didn't know what to say, which is why I always tell people, if we had more time, we would be going through scenarios and looking at what you should do, what you should say, because if you start practicing now, it will be almost automatic. But what happens if you haven't had a lot of experience is you could freeze and you end up saying nothing. So then, because remember, being an ally is taking action. So if you want to be an ally, you want to be able to take action. And in your organization, identify and share the unwritten rules and cultural norms in your organization that anyone who wants to be successful should know, because so often you come into an organization and if you're the only person, like if you're like, say, what only Black person, the only brown person, the only woman, whatever it is, you don't always know the unwritten rules. It's not like you don't know it. And if nobody tells you the unwritten rules, you're not going to know what it takes to be successful. So it's really important for you when somebody new comes in, who doesn't look like the dominant culture, that you study the unwritten rules and you help them figure out what they need to do in order to be successful, because oftentimes it's the unwritten rules that make a big difference. To mentor or create a formal mentorship program for new hires to help integrate everyone, not just the ones who are like you, into your organization. Because so often people assume that somebody's just like, they assume everybody's going to think the same way. And if you don't fit in, then you're out. But the reality is that if you don't take the time to get to know people, they're not going to be able to be successful in your organization. The other thing that you can do is be informed about attacks against different groups, whether it's verbal, physical, or destruction of property. So if you're informed, you'll be able to know what to do. And all of this is understanding yourself, understanding who you are, why you want to be an ally, and what you could do to become an ally. Do you have any questions so far? Anything that you would like to add? Because I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but this is an important discussion.
I think we're about to get kicked out again, so hopefully we'll get put back in.
Okay. Well, let me say
we can extend.
I extended it, so I think we'll be okay for another 5 minutes.
Okay. Don't wait for a crisis. Don't wait for a crisis to show your support. Get to know the other people that you work with right now. The more people feel connected and the more concern and empathy you show for people, the more comfortable they'll feel about telling you what's going on in the organization. So I'm going to ask this question. What would you do? Okay, time is up for the 10-minute. Do you want to close all breakout rooms now? I don't even know what that means. Should I just ignore that?
I would just say no. I don't see that. So I would say no if you can.
Okay. Keep breakout rooms. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to ask some questions about what would you do? What would you do if you're in a meeting and everybody in the org and you know, this is let's just to be real, everybody is white except for maybe one or two people, and one of the people who was not white raises their hand to speak and consistently doesn't get called on, but people who are white get to interrupt, they get to speak out, and nobody even acknowledges the person with the hand raised. What do you do?
Interrupt and acknowledge the person with their hand raised and say they have something to say. Or
exactly.
So-and-so has something to say. Can we please hear from them?
Exactly. Okay. what do you do? And what would you say if you're with people who are like you, they're your friends, you work with them, and somebody makes a racist joke? What would you say to interrupt that joke?
I believe whether they're your friends or not, you know, that shouldn't even be the barrier right there to break the ice even more. It's more comfortable to talk to your friends about it. So it should make it a little easier to correct the situation that's going on, whether you're friends or not. And when they're not your friends, you kind of really don't know where they're coming from. So you kind of got to tell them where you're coming from and how that's offensive to other people and how that affects other people. So I think that's a big thing.
Yeah. You have to be able to speak up. And you have to do it, you know, you want to do it in a way that gets the message across. I mean, if somebody's being an outright hater, then you're going to deal with them a little bit differently than somebody who doesn't even know what they're doing. But the reality is that as an ally, you can't say, oh, they didn't mean anything by it. Sometimes people say, oh, they didn't mean anything by it. Yes, they did. And you could help change them. I think, Tess, did you want to say something? Because you came up. Go ahead.
Yeah, it was actually real this time. I like the strategy that I just learned recently of turning to look them in the eye and ask them to explain what they meant.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, that's not, you know, it's not really confrontational. It's not saying you're a jerk, but it turns it back on them. Okay, if you thought that was funny, I'd like for you to explain to me why. What do you mean?
Yeah, and that's really very effective because it gets people to think. Or you say, could you unpack that? You know, what did you mean by that? Why are you saying that? And then it gets people to think. The other day, I was on a virtual call with people from my synagogue, and a woman who was like involved in social justice made this statement talking about, she made a statement saying that somebody didn't get enough time to speak. And she said, yeah, they really got gypped. Now, the term gypped is a really offensive term. It comes from the word gypsy, and it's from the stereotype of people stealing. You know, and so people say, oh, so-and-so got gypped, but it's a very offensive term. And so I had to think, I go, okay, I'm on a virtual thing. I don't need to call it out in front of everybody, but I just DM'd her and I said, look, I know that I know that you would want to know this. I said, since you're involved in social justice, I know that you would want to know this, but that's a very offensive term. And I told her why it was an offensive term. And then afterwards, she thanked me. She said, thank you so much. I'll never use that term again. So
there are sorry to interrupt, but there are so many terms like that especially like, you know, younger generations use. I had no idea that meant that until you just said that. But I'm learning a lot of things that we say are derivatives of racist, you know, of times when it was okay to be racist or acceptable. And that really just opened my eyes. It's like, man, we can't really, it's like, we almost can't say anything anymore because we don't know where it came from.
Well, can you think of any other examples?
Like long time no see, you know, again, I had no clue, I mean, until probably 10 years ago that was offensive to Asian folks, because that was something that was used against Asian people in the 1800s or early 1900s. There's a few others, I'm sure. I can't think of any right now, but obviously there's a lot.
I didn't even know that. I didn't even know that, but it's important to know.
I didn't either. So thank you, Chase. I think the thing that I always like, I think there's a big difference between somebody hearing that and reacting like Chase just did and saying, oh my gosh, I didn't know, I'll make a change, and people that get defensive when you say that. And I think that's the part that I always get nervous about, is if you say something, not that that's a good reason not to say anything, but it's always kind of disappointing when you say that and somebody reacts by being defensive or saying, well, I'm not offended, but something like that is always, I think, hard to encounter.
Yeah, no, and I think it's important that we pay attention. And I want to give you, before we close, I want to give you some examples that a lot of times people don't even realize that this is when people need allies, because people are so immersed in their own lives, or they don't even know that it is offensive. So it's so important to educate yourself. For instance, there's a promotion. That your boss wants to promote somebody. And when you look at who gets promoted, it's always somebody who looks just like your boss. But there's a lot of other talented people that don't look like your boss. People of color who don't look who want that same promotion, who might even be more qualified. So as an ally, it's up to you to then say to your boss, what about Maria? What about Anthony? What about, and to be able to speak up. And that's how you could be an ally, because oftentimes people say, that's just how it is. But you could make a difference. Another time when people need allies is, we said, when they're being bullied, when their ideas are being taken. We talk about jokes. But if you say to somebody, and this just happened recently, I was talking to one of my clients, and I said, look at your board. Your board's all white. Your executive leadership is all white. And you want to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So where are you recruiting from? And one of the senior leaders said to me, well, yeah, we need more people of color, but we don't want to lower our standards. So what would you say when somebody says that?
I wouldn't probably be with that employer. I mean, those aren't my values or my morals. So that would make me question if I even want to be with that employer, because that is not the response that anyone would want to hear.
I mean, even if they're not even if they're not your employer, but if you're on the senior leadership team with them, at that point, it's important to say, well, what do you mean by that? Well, why would you feel that it's necessary to say that?
At any point, though, is it okay to just say, well, that's unacceptable? Like,
I would, but I'm from the Bronx,
Yes.
I would say, I think mine, along with Chase, it's just, I was more like in shock if someone said that, and it's like, that's part of the problem.
Yeah, and you could say that's part of the problem.
How do I allow them, and at this point in time, we know it's not okay to be racist. Like, I'm hearing a lot of people say, well, give them the benefit of the doubt and ask them to elaborate. Like, no, I know what they meant. Like, I'm having a hard time not.
Well, it's not giving them the benefit of the doubt. You're making them, you want to tell them to elaborate because you want to know why they're saying it so that you could correct it.
All right.
No, like Jenny said, I used to be a diversity recruiter. Executives say that all the time. You know what? I so agree with you, because even though you might think, oh, it's not okay to be racist, but but part of the issue is that a lot of times people don't know what racism is. People don't really recognize it. And that's why if you know these things in advance, to understand what is racist, what is racism, what's sexism. It's not just somebody using the N-word or using some other word, but it's like these subtle things. And yeah, people need allies, when they're being attacked on the street, but at the same time, in the workplace, people need allies to help them get seen. Because so often people are just invisible. They don't get seen. And the leadership, the all-white leadership might say, well, I'm uncomfortable with somebody who's different, so therefore I'm just going to ignore these people. But you know what? As an ally, it's up to you